Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Ronnie Hopkins, Chairman of the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning Board. I want to thank everyone for joining us today, members of the board, our staff, and members of the public. I would like to offer a special welcome to Ms. Sierra Artemis on her first day of assignment as the Director of Communications and Marketing. Welcome to Voorhees University family. We're happy to have you. It is now 10 o'clock Verizon time, and I call this meeting to order. This meeting is being held in person from Lawrence Memorial Auditorium at Massachusetts Hall at Voorhees University and being live streamed on YouTube for the viewing public. At this time, Dean Sherigan Feaster Johnson, will you please call the roll? Good morning. Thank you. We do have a quorum. For the record, this meeting was publicly noticed in accordance with the South Carolina Freedom of Information Act. At this time, if you will join me in a posture of prayer, I will offer the invocation. Gracious and loving Father, we thank you for gathering us once again as stewards of the mission of the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning. Grant us wisdom as we deliberate, courage as we make decisions, and humility as we serve the students, families, and communities entrusted to our care. May our conversations be guided by integrity, innovation, and a shared commitment to educational excellence. Help us to see every challenge as an opportunity to expand hope and every decision as an investment in the future of those we serve. Bless this board, our staff, our school partners, and all who seek to transform lives through education. May the work we do today reflect your justice, compassion, and love. In your holy name we pray. Amen. The mission of the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning is to authorize and support high-quality charter schools advancing equity and student success. Our vision is to build a national model of HBCU-based authorizing grounded in excellence, innovation, and integrity. And before we adopt the agenda for today's meeting, I will begin with the chair's opening remarks. I would like to take a moment to reflect on Independence Day, which our nation observed nearly 2 weeks ago. This year holds special significance as the United States commemorates the 250th anniversary of the Declaration of Independence. It is a milestone that invites us not only to celebrate our nation's history, but also to reflect on the enduring ideals of liberty, opportunity, and self-governance, and on our shared responsibility to help those ideals become reality for every generation. As a historically Black university, Voorhees University long prepared leaders who understand that education is one of the most powerful expressions of opportunity, civic responsibility, and social progress. For generations, HBCUs have expanded access, develop principled leaders, and strengthen communities by opening doors that once seemed out of reach. Through the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning, we continue that legacy by helping ensure that more students have access to high-quality public schools capable of transforming lives and communities. Today's meeting reflects an important part of that responsibility. Our focus on performance and accountability is not simply about compliance or oversight. It is about defining what success looks like, measuring it with integrity, and ensuring that every decision we make remains centered on students. As members of this board, we have been entrusted with the responsibility of ensuring that the Institute fulfills its mission with excellence. Effective governance requires clear expectations, meaningful measures of performance, thoughtful oversight, and the courage to make decisions grounded in evidence. A strong performance framework provides the foundation for that work and helps ensure that we hold ourselves to the same high standards we expect of schools that we authorize. Thank you for your continued commitment to building a strong, credible, and high quality character charter authorizer. The work we do today will help establish the standards that guide this institute for years to come and ultimately expand opportunities for students and families across South Carolina. I look forward to today's discussion. And with that, we will proceed with the agenda. We will now begin our formal meeting. I would entertain a motion to adopt the agenda as presented. Thank you. It was moved by Dr. Hightower Mitchell, seconded by Dr. Hill. What say you, Dr. Hill, Vice President O'Berry, Dr. Green, Dr. Hightower Mitchell, Dr. Sojourner? Thank you. The motion passes. Next on the agenda is approval of our last public meeting minutes. May I have a motion to approve the minutes from the June 18th, 2026 public meeting? Do I have a second? Moved by Dr. Green, seconded by Vice President O'Berry. Uh, Dr. Hill, what say you? Vice President O'Berry, Dr. Green, Dr. Hightower Mitchell, Dr. Sojourner? Thank you. That motion passes as well. At the beginning of every board meeting, the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning hears public testimony related to items on the agenda and listens to testimony for topics not related to any agenda items. Each speaker will have 2 minutes to speak. We ask that commenters remain respectful and keep their remarks limited to the time allotted. However, there is no one who's signed up to give public comments today. As such, this concludes our public comment portion of our agenda. Next on our agenda is the Executive Director's Report. I will yield the floor to the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning staff, beginning with Dr. Wendy Stevenson, our founding Executive Director.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Good day, everyone. It is a blessing to be gathered here today for our July 15th board meeting. On behalf of Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning, I want to thank each of you, board members, our NASCA team, our UNCF partners, for your continued presence, your partnership, and your investment in this work. What I have to share today reflects a period of significant forward moving. Since our June 18th meeting, much has happened and much more is in motion. I will walk you through a few areas of updates. First, yeah, sorry, PowerPoint slides. First, our Act 123 and our engagement with the South Carolina Department of Education, including our June 30th input session and our July 20th follow-up meeting. Second, pre-opening monitoring of C.R. Neal Academy, a rooted school. Third, two new school inquiries that reflect VUCIL's growing visibility. And I will close with a brief word on posture and commitment. On June 30th, I represented the Institute at the South Carolina State Department's authorizers input session. This was a virtual meeting on Act 123. I will want to be transparent. The session was just stakeholder dialogue. The South Carolina State Department's guidance is still being finalized. However, I raised three priority questions on our behalf. The first was grandfathered status and the statement of assurances. The Institute is confirmed grandfathered as a pre-2026 authorizer, but the model of assurances document and execution process are still not yet confirmed. Second, board and administrator training. The July 1 trigger is now in effect. The South Carolina State Department has not confirmed their orientation curriculum or compliance tracking expectations. This will be a follow-up meeting July 20th. Third, performance framework alignment. No model framework exists at the South Carolina State Department. These questions have opened, and of course, I will follow up with the meeting again on July 20th at 1:30 to press on each for a definite answer. Tomorrow, July 16th, we hold the Ready to Open kickoff with C.R. Neal Academy, a rooted school. This formally launches the pre-opening monitoring process. We also resolve the South Carolina Department of Education IT and OSF portal access issues for CR Neal. So now they have full operational access to the portal and have submitted property acquisition documentation. On the charter contract, we have drafted a draft based on the South Carolina State Department model. The board subcommittee is in review as well as legal is in review, and those are the immediate next steps. Application cycle. I am pleased to share that since June meeting, we have received 2 unsolicited inquiries about prospective school founders, evidence that the Institute is an authorizer is growing. Excuse me, talking too fast. The first is from Dr. Dominique Sanders and the co-founder Ron Summers, proposing Catalyst Lab Academy, 6th through 12th school for students with language-based learning differences in Berkeley County. Dr. Sanders is a Vanderbilt graduate. He's a proud HBC alumnus of Jackson State. The model is compelling, I must say. Credentials are strong, and Berkeley County is underdeserved. I will schedule an introductory call, no commitment to anything at this time. The second is Pedro Armour, asking for the letter of intent deadline for the August 2028 opening, an early stage inquiry. We will respond with timeline guidance once our application calendar is finalized, of course, by the State Department. These 2 unsolicited inquiries in a single month, I mean, the word is out. As I reflect on where we are and on everything this quarter has asked of us, I am reminded that the work of building something new, something that has never existed in quite this form before, and never without complexity. We are the nation's only active HBCU charter school authorizer. That is not a title, that is a responsibility. We are navigating rewritten state law. We are standing up LEA infrastructure from the ground. We are preparing to support schools that we serve children who deserve nothing but the best. We are doing all of this with a team that shows up day after day with seriousness of purpose and a commitment of excellence. The posture I intend to hold, and that I believe this institution must hold, is proactive, precise, and unafraid to seek clarity where the path is still being defined. We will document what we know, and we will press for what we need to know, and we will not wait for others because we are capable ourselves. To our board members, thank you for your trust, your guidance, your presence, and your vote of confidence in this work means everything. To our NASCA and NUCF partners, thank you for walking alongside us with your expertise, generosity, and a shared vision of what quality authorizing can look like. I am deeply grateful for this table, for this team, and for this work. Now you will hear from the interim executive director, Mr. Elliott Smalley.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. I'm just going to keep it on this slide because we can pull these up. Dr. Stevenson did a great job of summarizing a lot of the key actions that have happened since we last met. I just wanted to say it's my first time back in this room and with y'all in person, and it feels so good because the last time we were together, we had C.R. Neal Academy right here, and these other groups that had put so much work into these applications. And in that moment, I'm brought back to that feeling of celebration that we had. I mean, literal tears of joy. And as I was coming in, I saw a sign twice: begin, believe, become. And I took a photo of that on my phone because I feel like it actually captures where we are. Because when we were last year in person, it was all about the beginning and believing. And now it's about becoming. And so I just wanted to kind of anchor with a key theme here, which is a shift. A shift. These actions that we're now bringing to you and updating you on are about implementation. We're going to operationalize this thing now, and that's what we're focused on. And so the meeting with the State Department of Education, which we built in a recurring schedule every single month, we meet with them. And this isn't a meeting that they hold and we come to and they fix the agenda. We build this agenda with them. And this is a exclusive Voorhees, South Carolina Department of Ed meeting that we get to build the agenda around. And the whole purpose of this is to make sure we're getting with them every single month. 12 months out of the first school opening, what is it that we need? What submissions are coming up? What deadlines? To make sure that we are always on top of everything we have to do as a district. And I can't stress this enough. This is a very different context here. I know we've talked about it, but it bears repeating. You know, last month, Jay from NACSA and I did a presentation on the LEA infrastructure work that happens in parallel with CR Neal opening. We're a school district now. And that is very different, as my colleague, Dr. Peterson and Chantel Wright can attest. It's very different from what's happening around the country, and that we are a school district. And so we have a lot of obligations as the LEA that we need to make sure that we meet. So we're really digging in now with the State Department on that specific work. And one direct result of our meeting last week is they are looking at our pre-opening checklist that we built to share with CR Neal tomorrow, where we're going to get together with them, collaborate, connect around common expectations for the year and what we expect from them, what they expect from us and need from us. And we want the State Department to scrutinize that list and tell us, hey, here's what's required. This is something that you have to submit. This Title I plan is due on such and such date. You have to have your financial system set up by this date, your power school by this date. And so we've asked them very explicitly, look at our list and tell us, crosswalk any compliance things that you have against our list, refresh it. And so they're doing that right now. They're looking at those materials before our meeting. So that's exactly the kind of syncing up that we want to be doing with the State Department. Dr. Stevenson mentioned, and I'll just close with this, two people reaching out about new schools. I was going to underscore today that the next time we meet is going to be in August. And when you think about this, letters of intent are due. So anybody throw the date out for me? Dr. Stevenson, you're not allowed to answer this. Anybody? Letters of intent, November 1. You think about that. That's 3.5 months from now. And the letter of intent deadline is so important because if you don't submit a letter of intent, you can't apply. And so if you don't submit a letter of intent to Voorhees, you're excluded from applications. So what we want to make sure is that pool of letters of intent, folks, is as deep as it possibly can be, is as representative as possible of the kinds of leaders and people that are aligned with Voorhees and this board and this mission. And so what are we doing over the next 3.5 months to kind of get out there in the state of South Carolina and help connect with partners and others and communities all across the state to make sure that, hey, if you're a person who wants to open a school here and bring transformational, generational change to students that they so desperately deserve, we want you to apply with Voorhees. And that timeline is only really 3.5 more months. And so I wanted to say, as we look ahead, what are the priorities between now and next meeting? And just getting our minds around like, okay, what's a big priority over the next few months? And that is charter development. And so the State Department has offered to meet with us, talk through strategies. That's going to be a big priority. So I just want to leave you with that's an exciting work stream for us, something we need to get out. And we'd be curious your input into that because it's really important. And my hope is that through our efforts over the next few months, we'll have some really outstanding applicants and those letters of intent, and that we'll have some really strong applications come the application cycle, so that we're sitting here again next year and we're having that same celebration, and we've got a few applicants that have come in and they're ready to do the work. So I'll leave you with that, and if you have any questions for us, please let me know.
Thank you, Dr. Stevenson and Mr. Smalley. Board members, are there any questions for either of them? Are there any questions? Dr. Hightower Mitchell?
Is on. So thank you for the opportunity to ask questions. I actually had someone, I don't even know which school for whom they were applying, but there's someone who was a part of an application process during the last review. And I think they had questions about whether or not there would be an opportunity for them to resubmit. And my question would be whether or not there will be any guidance or support for people to actually strengthen their applications if it was someone that we thought had potential but was not quite ready. What is our process for trying to support them so we do have high quality applicants?
Yeah, absolutely. I would just start by saying we should be reaching out over the next 4 weeks to all of the applicants who came through just to see where are they. And we had some engagements right after they applied. Dr. Stevenson and I actually had a follow-up meeting with one of the applicants, but they canceled it. They wanted to take a little bit of time. Now is the time to reach back out to them. And it's totally a standard in the authorizing community to be reaching out to people who applied. They didn't quite meet the mark. So let's work with them around what were the gaps that we saw last time. And we can talk very deliberately and intentionally about that and go through that with them. And so I think that we shouldn't just be encouraged to do that. We should absolutely do that and put that on our list of things to do. We should be reaching out to the applicants. I'd also encourage if you hear from anyone to also route that to us, the staff, so that we can then follow up operationally and we can get meetings with them and start to talk about, the application process well ahead of letters of intent.
Other questions or comments from the board? Just curious about the General Assembly and just developing legislation. Is there any consternation or concern that we should have about any developing legislation that's coming up?
Well, I'll start this, but I'll also defer to Dr. Stevenson, who attended a meeting about Act 123 for authorizer stakeholder input. So she may have some further insight into this. I would say that I feel like things are heading really in the right direction that align with who Voorhees is and the quality bar that you're really working to establish in over the last couple of years in terms of all the things you've done to found this are really aligned with where Act 123 is bringing authorizing. Based on national best practices, higher bar for students, higher bar of accountability. We have crosswalked that entire act against our pre-opening documents, also just against all of our operational documents and tools that we're using to manage the work to make sure that the new requirements are reflected in what we're asking of our schools and also asking of ourselves. So I don't carry a lot of consternation in there right now. I know that the State Department is working on implementation of it. And so they've been very communicative with us and invited us to meetings. So I feel like we're well informed on it. It is really, I feel like the legislation has moved in the direction of holding a higher bar. When we think about NACSA standards of authorizing, it's really better reflecting those, which is exactly where we want to go anyway. So that would be my response.
And I'll add to that, it is about accountability. I mean, high quality authorizing. That's what it's all about now. However, the State Department has opened their doors to us. So any other questions that you may feel that you may have for us, please email them to us because it may be something that we may miss. And just let us know. We have our follow-up meeting July 20th. I'm going in person. Of course, there is a virtual option. And if any of you like to attend, just let us know.
Other questions or comments? Again, thank you, Mr. Smiley. Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. We certainly appreciate the great work that you do. We really
Yes, sir.
appreciate you. Next is the heart of today's agenda as the Institute work to finalize its performance framework. It is critical that we align on the purpose and impact of performance and accountability frameworks. To support that learning and alignment, we welcome Chantel Wright from UNCF, who will introduce today's training, and the team who will facilitate. Welcome, Chantel. And again, let me say publicly, thank you for the amazing work and support that you provide for Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning. We so appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Hopkins. Good morning, everyone. For those of you I've not had the opportunity to meet, I'm Chantel Wright. I'm the one that emails you all the time and says, "Can you do this? Can you do that?" But in my day to day, I lead the work at UNCF around HBCU K-12 partnership work, including our support of Voorhees University as it develops the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning. UNCF's role in this work is to help bring together the strategy, expertise, resources, and people necessary to move the Institute from an important vision to strong and fully functioning organization. That has meant working closely with Voorhees leadership, helping to identify and address critical areas of readiness, and galvanizing a team of experienced professionals who can support the development of the Institute. This team includes Elliot Smalley, who you all have met and worked with, who's helping to lead the overall development and implementation of the authorizing and LEA work. Now you will meet in person, but we introduced to you via email Dr. Kelly Peterson, who is leading the governance work and supporting the development of the board structure, capacity, and practices. Many of you know Kelly from other arrangements, but very excited to have her. She will be working directly with you all as a board to get you ready, to get you strong, to make sure you fully understand this work in front of you. And then, of course, we have Jay Whalen, who you have met over the last few years from NACSA, or the National Association of Charter School Authorizers, who's supporting the development of VUCL's performance and accountability framework. You know, Jay also set the structure for your application review. He is actually leading the drafting of the performance framework that we will bring to you starting in August and then hopefully get approved over the next couple months. Each of us brings different areas of responsibility, but we are all aligned around the same goal. That is ensuring that the Institute has the systems, the leadership, governance, and infrastructure necessary to serve students, schools, families, and the broader community well. Today's session marks an important next step in the development of the Institute as a strong, credible, and effective charter school authorizer and local education agency, or LEA. The Board of Directors carries one of the most consequential responsibilities in this work. You are not simply overseeing an organization. As you know, for having gone through 2 application cycles, you're called upon to make decisions about whether or not schools should be approved. But the next phase of work includes making decisions on how their performance will be monitored, when intervention may be necessary, and ultimately whether schools have earned the right to continue serving students and families. That's what your performance framework does. Those decisions cannot be based on instinct, relationships, or isolated moments in time. They must be grounded in clear expectation, reliable evidence, consistent processes, and an unwavering focus on what is best for students. That is the purpose of a strong performance and accountability framework. It establishes in advance what schools are expected to accomplish, how that performance will be measured, and how that information will guide the board's oversight and decision making. It also creates transparency and fairness for schools, families, communities, and the overall public. The next phase of our work will be the development of the Institute's own performance and accountability framework. Today's training is intended to ensure that the board understands the purpose of that framework, the role it plays in the Institute's oversight of schools, and the responsibility board members will carry in using it to make it fair, consistent, and evidence-based decisions. This work is especially important for the Institute because you serve not only as an authorizer, but also as the LEA for the schools within its portfolio. You are basically the central office of a school district. That brings additional responsibilities related to special education, federal programs, compliance, accountability, and the overall educational experience of students. The board must understand both the authority it holds and the obligations that come with that authority. As a historically Black university, Voorhees has a long tradition of preparing leaders, expanding opportunity, and serving the communities that too often have been overlooked and underserved. Now you have the opportunity to extend that legacy by demonstrating what rigorous, mission-driven, and centered authorizing can look like. Our goal is not to simply create another framework or adopt another set of documents. It is to build the board's capacity to use the framework, to ask the right questions, to distinguish governance from management, evaluate evidence objectively, and make difficult decisions with consistency, courage, and integrity. I encourage each of you to engage fully today. Ask questions. There's no dumb question. We all know that from growing up. but seriously, today is a training ground for understanding. Oh, thank you. For understanding what these frameworks do. We are not going to go in today of what we propose Voorhees does, but just understanding in general how these frameworks work. Um, and so challenge assumptions and think carefully about what this responsibility will require of you individually and collectively. Dr. Peterson will lead us through today's session and help us examine the purpose of performance accountability framework, the board's role in using them, and how these tools should inform the Institute's oversight and decision making. Kelly, thank you for leading this important work. And with that, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you, board.
Good morning, Chair of the Board and board members. Excited to be with you all today. I know I have a lot of educators in front of me, so you all, this will not be lecture style. There will be some discussion and interaction, so get ready to talk to me. So the conversation that we're going to have today obviously is around the performance framework. And while we're not going to go into detail about every indicator and measure, it's really about grounding you in understanding truly what is the purpose, what is the role, and taking some time for you to think about the types of decisions that you will need to make utilizing this tool. And we'll have some discussion questions throughout. So anytime I am talking to boards, and specifically as we're talking about authorizing, I like to ground us in the law. And as you all know, your Act 123 and the Charter School Act of 1996 is where we're starting. And so it's really important for you to always go back to this as kind of where you want to start to really understand the roles and responsibilities that are before you. And so we think about this in this slide here. I pulled out specifically the relevant parts related to what the law requires of an authorizer and the roles. And so I'll give you a moment just to kind of look. I know that font might be a little small, so there's that. You may have it in front of you as well, some additional pieces. But want to start here just in terms of if there's anything that you notice about these identified responsibilities of an authorizer. And I underline some key things for you just to make your attention there.
What you're saying that the first thing that comes to mind for me as I'm reading this is that there are very clear action verbs here. This is not a passive role or scenario. There are things like negotiate, oversight, monitor, conduct. Um, so there is an expectation that there is deep involvement in supporting um, this work in the schools that we establish. And oversight tends to be a theme running through a lot of this.
Absolutely. Anyone else notice anything that they like to share?
One of the things that I noticed, I know from seeing prior um, maybe amendments such as this, it some may say must, and as you say, others might may, but this is exact.
Exact. It's
Exact.
a lot of must, right?
Must. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So that stood out immediately. And you talked about the fact that you see some of the things that's already seen, but I see things in my mind. I keep seeing contract and um, and oversight.
Okay, contract and oversight,
Uh-huh.
and a
It
lot of
just-
must.
A lot of must,
Mhm.
contracts and things in writing and oversight.
Okay.
Mhm.
Anyone else like to add anything additional?
I was perusing it and trying to find a specific section on authorizers
Mhm.
and don't see it. A specific section in this particular document. Did I overlook that?
Yep, so this right here is the specific section, section B, a charter school authorizer. And all of these under there, and there's, I think, two other ones. These are some of the ones I pulled out, but there's a total of 20. But these identify specifically in this code what a charter school authorizer must do.
Must do. Gotcha.
Mhm. And there is a section that is about the charter school. This is just the authorizer component.
Thank you.
Mhm.
And I think it prudent for the group to maybe do a session on reading everything so that we can exchange when we have a chance to fully read the document.
Absolutely. And just as an authorizer in general, I like to always say you kind of moonlight also into law, right? And so this is what you want to ground in. What does it truly state in terms of law that we were required to do? Of course, as you continue to mature as an authorizer, there are going to be additional things that are aligned to your mission and vision. But this is where we want to start. And we want to make sure that like at the ground level, we're setting ourselves up to be successful because we're following, we understand what's required by the letter of the law. And so again, I only pulled out some of these. There's about 20 of them total as it relates to the charter school authorizer, what your roles or responsibilities are. And so here, again, listening to some of the conversation around like some of the things you pulled out, we really can put it here. There are two kind of places where these all fall under the ongoing oversight activities and then high stakes accountability decisions. This is how a lot of that work is delineated when we look at the law and everything that's laid out of those 20. They're either going to fall in oversight activities or accountability decisions. And so what I also want to share here is when we think about it in terms of your role, you are the board and there's a staff. When we look at this broken down in this way, when we think about the staff is the one in which they're doing the on-site and ongoing activities, right? They are doing all of those components. However, as the board, your role is to be able to make these high stakes accountability decisions. And when you look at those two that are here pulls from that law, it's around determining whether each charter contract meets merit for renewal, non-renewal, or revocation, or if you have to make the decision to permanently close a school based on their performance, right? So those are some really, really high stakes decisions, and those are all based on the on-site ongoing oversight activities. As you think about, I know we're real early in our authorizing role. However, we at some point we have to get to this place in terms of making decisions. So if we were to posture ourselves to get to that place and think about the decisions, these high stake decisions that we would have to make, what is it that you feel like you would need in order to know whether to make these decisions, whether to renew, non-renew, or move forward in that way? What types of information as a board would you want to know?
Achievement data, certainly.
So achievement data, financial information, compliance.
Let me remind the board to speak into the mic, please, so that people online can hear you. Thank you.
Anything else?
The genuine reason why, say a school had to close or had to come into question, we would need to know exactly what is it. We'd have to look at leadership, what's going on with them, what is going on with that staff, what are just the undercore areas where there are weaknesses, and it's probably something that we should be looking at all the time. But then we would have to know what brings it to a head.
And so much of our conversation is going to help you all to continue to clarify that piece and make sure that when you are postured to make a decision, you have the right information that you need, because you are monitoring it ongoingly, right, in order to make that decision. And that's the point of a performance framework, being able to be clear about the expectations up front. Just a quick takeaway here. The law requires authorizers to monitor performance, identify deficiencies, require corrective action, and make high-stake decisions like renewal, non-renewal, and revocation. Those are very significant responsibilities. As outlined, we saw it was a must, not you might, you shall, possibly it was a you must. And so familiarizing yourselves with that part of the law is going to be really, really essential to make sure that, one, that is the foundation that you all set up to be continued to be high-quality authorizers. Every action, every decision require clear expectations. And so, again, the law tells you what you are responsible for as an authorizer. What they don't do is define success in those expectations. That happens in two places. That happens in the contract, as we just mentioned, and the performance framework. You all are educators, so you know we all have edu speak a lot of times. So there's also this word in authorizing called performance contracting. And that's when we look at the contract to also embed the actual expectations. It outlines the roles, the rights, and responsibilities of not only the school, but also the authorizer, right? And so oftentimes our contracts embed that performance framework, those performance expectations, or have it as an appendix. But that is where we clearly identify the clear expectations. This is both for you as an authorizer to be able to be very clear about your expectations for their performance. We'll talk about which areas those are, but also for a school to be very clear about what am I signing up for? What am I actually to be able to be expected within that performance expectation? What do I need to be? And so we want to make sure that we create that. And part of this conversation today will help you all continue to see where those begin to come into play in this place of authorizing. This is just a grounding as we looked at, started with your South Carolina statute, wanting to break us to national standard of just in terms of the role and responsibility of a charter school authorizer as defined by NACSA. At the end of the day is who can start a charter school. They set academic and organization operational expectations, and they oversee school performance. Those are the three roles. However, it still is at the end of the day grounded by having clear academic and operational expectations at the core. That also aligns exactly what is written in your Act 123 as well. You are doing those things. You are approving new schools. You are overseeing school performance, and you're making high stakes decisions. But what's at the core of that is the expectations, and those have to be clear from the start. And that little where the arrow is pointing to is pulled out from your Act 123 stating that a charter school contract, right? So we talked about the places where we clarify our expectations are in that contract or performance expectations, and it must outline the roles, powers, responsibilities, and performance expectations for each party. So performance expectations are communicated within the charter contract and the performance framework. And again, that can be done in a multitude of ways. Oftentimes it is referenced that it will be the performance expectations will be communicated by the performance framework, and that's part of an appendix item in the contract. Any questions as I continue? So now that we know that as an authorizer, lots of things that we must do at the end of the day, we have to be clear about our performance expectations, and that happens in the contract or the performance framework. So let's get into specifically what is the charter school performance framework. At the end of the day, it's the primary accountability tool used by authorizers to define those expectations, to monitor the progress, evaluate results, and inform the high stakes decisions throughout that charter term. When we think about the language that was in Act 123, it talks about you must monitor performance. Well, the framework identifies what's actually monitored. Act 123 says you analyze data. The framework is going to identify what data actually matters. You must notify schools of deficiency. The framework defines what those deficiencies could be. Corrective action, the framework identifies what intervention is warranted. And renewal and non-renewal, the framework establishes evidence to support those decisions. Furthermore, there's two fundamental questions that a framework truly answers is one, how is the school truly performing? And two, what actions should be taken? What's really important as we think about this as an accountability tool, as an authorizer, something that's used by the authorizer and the authorizing staff, it's also utilized by the school as well. well. They should be able to know how they are performing in the eyes of their authorizer because of the expectation that you set forth. It's providing a clear objective picture of the totality of the school, and that goes in the academic, organizational, and financial health. And then what actions should be taken related to any interventions, levels of oversight, or again, high stakes decisions that must be made as a result of. A performance framework should assess a school performance using multiple measures of quality. As you all know, lots of things changed when we got into COVID related to how we evaluate schools, and specifically a lot of different conversations that came forward for authorizers around not only just looking at the academic outcomes, but also thinking about the whole child. And so you saw a lot of authorizers begin to have conversations around how we evaluate social emotional health, student well-being, and putting those components in there as well. And so it's not a one or the other, it's a both and approach when we think about measuring multiple measures of quality. Also conducting school performance assessments on a regular basis and consistent across the school, right? We want to make sure that we're measuring apples to apples and we're looking at our portfolio holistically, utilizing a tool that we can truly begin to assess our schools with. Providing clear expectations. You're going to continue to hear clear expectations throughout our the conversation today. That is truly at the core. It's transparent and it's clear expectations. And then lastly, establishing predictable and transparent consequences for when those expectations are not met. Okay? So that's when we really think about what actually is in a performance framework.
May I ask, during the development of the performance framework, how much input, if any, do schools have in the as that framework is confirmed?
Yep, good question. I would say each authorizer's approach is different, and it has a lot to do with where the authorizer is in the life cycle. So there are authorizers who already were operating on one framework, and their schools had signed a contract on that, and then they were changing it. So that's going to look a little bit different in terms of the buy-in that they need because they've already signed that contract, right? On the front end, as you all, we do plan to have some conversations with the new school and just to get some feedback there. But we also will have that dialogue with you all as well to make sure that we have your values represented.
And is there a scenario or a situation where there is a contract signed and development of a framework, and then based on assessment, there need to be changes to the framework? Have you seen that scenario before? And then is the expectation that you'll go back and change the contract? How would that happen?
Yep.
How
So a lot
how
of
would that
times,
be managed?
yeah. So a lot of times, what will happen for that reason, because the performance framework can change. So, for example, when state accountability changes, right? Oftentimes, that means that measure that's academic measure will then have to change to the performance framework. So instead of having to have to do all of that, usually there's a line of the contract that states that you will be measured off a performance framework, right? And just notify when changes are made so that you don't have to go back through the entire contracting process, which is why it's usually more of an appendix item that's added onto the contract as opposed to being embedded into it, because we know there are different changes that happen at the state level, specifically around the academic. Yeah.
well, and I was listening very closely to what you were saying because, so that means then that in this total monitoring process, that you're going to keep your eyes open to what's going on with the state because you know how the state is in terms of, um, well, testing drives everything in the state of South Carolina. You know. So, um, you're going to keep your eyes open in terms of, making sure the school meet the requirement for the testing for the state, which is a big stake here. But you're also going to have, it sounds like, you're going to have a leeway there that we'll give this new school that we're starting an opportunity to survive, even if they don't come to that total compliance with the state. Is that what I'm hearing? Or is that not what you're saying? Yes. Okay. Right. Right. Okay, and we don't have to time to discuss this right here and now at this time, but I do think we need to keep our eyes wide open to that piece that you came in. She talked about the socioeconomic piece because that becomes very important when it was added after COVID came in, and you know the damage that was done there. That became so very important for students when we started looking at what kind of progress they're going to make, how they're going to make it, and what are the bottom line causes for those issues. So I trust that we're going to look at that very closely because, it's just key for the progress of students and for schools. Yes. Right. Without, right. Yes. And when it comes to testing, that can be easily overlooked. Yes. Easily overlooked. Yes. Easily overlooked. Okay,
And
I'm
the
done.
purpose of this is really to ground you to be prepared and leave some seeds for when you have that conversation, you're more poised and postured to say, this is what matters, this is what we value. And now we're talking about the details of those things, right? And so you can see how it's utilized, begin to see how you're going to use it as a board, starting to figure out like, what decisions do I need to make? These decisions have to be able to be replicated and justified and evidence so that when you come in August to get into that nitty gritty of the details, you're ready to have that conversation.
Yes.
I'm sorry, I know I'm new, but as I'm listening to that question, Dr. Sturt's point, individualized performance. Um, there are different socioeconomic, demographic concerns, but also I think a lot of times individualized performance plans are implicated after they're issued. But I think since you guys are, authorizing schools, maybe creating individualized plans going into to guarantee success, not when there's issues, especially when you're thinking about the demographic that they're catering to. Just I didn't know if that that these things are implicated. Because I think about restaurants, how they have like the ratings and the grades, but they also, if anybody, get an opportunity to work on what it is the problem is, you know, and but then what is the time frame? Like how long before you decide, okay, we've done the performance plan, done this, nothing has worked. Now we have to take steps into, you know, what are we gonna do?
Yep, so I'll share a little bit and then you all feel free to jump
Sorry,
into.
I'm
No, you're fine.
sorry.
So when we think about the performance framework, right? That's a framework that's outlining the expectations that the authorizer has in the areas of academics, organizational, operational, and financial, right? And there are clear, and we'll talk about like all the terms or whatever, but that is the clear expectations in those areas. Now, those things will be monitored ongoing. So throughout the life cycle of that charter school. There are points within that charter term, specifically around renewal, where we're going to take a combination of all of those ratings to make a high stakes decision. However, throughout that charter term, if you're beginning to notice that, hey, they're not meeting standard on this is now where I have the latitude as an authorizer to understand what are the corrective actions or the interventions that I need to make sure that I set forth for them to actually remedy that before we get to set high stakes decision. That can be through notices, I think, and the statute is called deficiencies, right? And so a notice of deficiency to let you know, hey, you're not meeting this. I expect you to have this remedied by X date. And then that's up to them. But it's around the communication. And so in that framework, you're building out, yes, here are the expectations. And then when these are not met, here's the way in which we will communicate those to you. Now, the authorizer is not telling them how to fix it, but I am telling you that it needs to be fixed, right? And that's that balance of authorizer and autonomy.
And would it be more like a quarterly framework? Because I know schools operate differently.
So the framework exists throughout the term of the charter, right? So like annually, right? And so the authorizing office and that staff will determine what activities happen when. And so some of those activities might be site visits. There are different submission requirements and requests. There might be board observations. It just depends on what that framework comes to be, but those happen throughout the entire. Yep. All right. Great. So I know we are all familiar with the what gets measured gets managed. When we think about authorizing, however, I want us to think about it in the term of what gets measured drives accountability. What drives accountability improves outcomes, but only when we measure the right things. And I want to ground us here because what we can get into is like, well, let's measure everything. We're going to look at everything, right? And we don't want to do that because then we're getting very, very bureaucratic. And so I think my colleagues shared and uplifted something that's really important is the opportunity that's in front of you all as the only HBCU authorizer and to be in this point and process at this point where you can really begin to think about what is our vision for excellence and how do we define success, not just replicating how everyone else does it, but how do we define success to drive that? And so it's about measuring the right things, not all things, the right things. And so as we mentioned in the Act 123, you had the very clear charter school authorizer must, right? There's another section in there that says charter schools must. And so when we think about that, those are some things that we've mentioned. Those are the compliance components. Those are things that we usually integrate into the performance framework to make sure they are legally compliant with the state and federal law. In addition, however, it's around measuring the right things. And you all have the opportunity to set those clear expectations about what the right things are. In the charter sector, we understand that with a lot of autonomy comes accountability. So while you are not asking or requiring the prescription of curriculum, you're not dictating their instructional models. You aren't telling them how to organize their staff, and you aren't telling them how to accomplish their mission. What you are doing is defining what the expectation is and how we define success. You are only measuring their outputs and outcomes, not their inputs, right? It's about your performance framework is saying, this is what we expect. Now, how you get from A to Z is on you because you are a charter school and you are granted that autonomy. But without autonomy, I'm holding you accountable. And so key principles here about strong authorizers go directly here around it focuses on outcomes, not inputs. Resisting the temptation to manage school. So that day-to-day operations, that's not where we are there. They are able to do that, right? The exchange and understanding the autonomy in exchange for accountability and making sure that we're governing performance. Yep. And so when we think about the role of an authorizer, as an educator, it's often we want to know a lot of things about the school, like I said, mentioning around like dictation of the instructional model, the curriculum, how they're organizing staff, right? Those are not the roles of the authorizer. The authorizer has clearly stated that this is what we are giving you a contract to do to meet these expectations. And because of that, we will hold you accountable to those and we will make decisions off of that, not how you actually do those inputs. So they have autonomy over how they spend their money, right? All of those. As an authorizer, you are monitoring their fiscal responsibility through fiscal compliance for sure. You are monitoring their outcomes and how they actually utilize their curriculum based on their academic outcomes for students. You are monitoring, their staff organization based on as you look at their operational compliance. However, you are not actually telling them what to do. You are only holding them accountable through clear and transparent expectations.
As to follow that point, so are we responsible then for disseminating the support, right? Do we need to have a resource person for what each of those deficiencies may be? What would be our responsibility in supporting those institutions?
I think that's a good question. And I'm going to let me give an answer. So when we think about your role as an authorizer, right? When we narrow it down to those three, you approve schools, right? You ensure that that ongoing oversight is happening, and then you have to make a decision about renewal, non-renewal, and revocation. You have ensured that they've gone through an approval process to demonstrate that they have the ability and the capacity to execute on what they said and what you are clear that the expectations are for performance. Through your ongoing oversight, when you begin to see like there's some what we call indicators of distress, like things, there's a little smoke there, right? As an authorizer, you are notifying them of there's a problem. When you get into some authorizers have different philosophical beliefs about this, and I think it's a tension within the space and understanding where you stand as an authorizer. There are some authorizers who believe that, hey, I'm going to notify you and give you a date in which to remedy. And you utilize the resource because you have that autonomy. I gave you that autonomy. I'm only holding you accountable, right? You do have authorizers who have set up and created maybe a support role of a sense, right? There is tension there because if you support me and I still don't meet the metric, how can you then hold me accountable? I did what you said and I still didn't improve, right? And so you have authorizers across the country that do have support. There are those that don't get into support, but it's something that you have to be aware of that if we decide to go in that way, understanding what could come back around from it to say, well, we did exactly what you told me to do and it still didn't work, right? And so that becomes a very gray space to be in when then you have to potentially make a decision about that outcome that you potentially help to support, right? And so that's something that you want to be aware of. You also have authorizers who utilize their landscape. and say, hey, we're not going to help you, but we do have this partner and this partner and this partner that are in this space. And because we have a relationship, hey, go talk to them, right? And staying out of it, right? And just creating the economy of support around, but that it's not necessarily coming from the authorizer because you still have to make a decision. I don't, anything you all would share?
I would add, I think it is a good conversation for the board to have. I think we should one, know that if you provide support, it is a bunch of expensive, right? Because not only are you building up your own staff, oversight and monitoring, and you're also talking about support, like providing support. But yeah, like it can get really expensive. But I think it's one of the things that I've noticed learning South Carolina, there's also been very careful about your landscape too. If you read the news, one of your fellow authorized, a lot of schools get around those kind of contract they had of um, encouraging their schools to use certain resources in a way that is not as neutral as it should be. But I do think one of the things that we want to be able to ask for institute is a series of support, but not telling people you got to use this person, that person, etc. But here are people that trust in schools. Like the bigger picture is what Dr. Stevens talked about. The minute, but I did exactly what you told me to do. My scores are still low, and you still want to close. We had a little bit of that people there. The executive director, the prior executive director, had a really strong relationship with a support organization that he was constantly encouraging schools to use, and those schools still weren't making the money. And so then it was a question like, where did the kickback, what's happening, what's going on, and if people still working in a way that I want to. But I think it's worth a good conversation so that everybody knows in the line of where we'll add that to our philosophical value conversation for all.
Just, I think to help us parallel our understanding of the framework, there's just two parallels that I think will help solidify this for us. One is our own accreditation that we're accredited by the Southern Association of Commission on Colleges, which they'll becoming Commission on Colleges, period, soon. But they provide 73 standards to institutions, and institutions have to meet the minimum standard. And so that's sort of the state thing. So we have to decide that when we see the state standards, that's one thing, but we have to decide what will the standard be for the Voorhees University Charter Institute of Learning, which certainly will be much higher. It'll be much more robust. It will reflect the excellence of HBCUs. So keep that in mind. And the other thing about the management of the schools, I clearly, and this is probably because what's nightmarish, I have a board meeting in the next 2 days, consider how the board operates with the institution and the way that we typically identify when boards are out of order is considered overreach. And so we have to keep that in mind and ask ourselves, is this overreach when we're reaching into those schools and telling them and mandating beyond the framework? So that can help us with our understanding as we proceed.
The school leaders use that word overreach really regularly, and you should expect, particularly in, I know personally, in charter schools, particularly because charter school leaders are entrepreneurs. They're autonomous. They created this school because they felt like the district was too strict. They wanted this autonomy and creativity. So believe me, they will send you, and I say that as a fellow school leader, I said my authorizer, this is overreach. We will not be responding. This is not your, because it felt like, it was over. So that is a term definitely here.
And the benefit too, as you think about just the supports that are needed along the way as you begin to continue this and grow your portfolio and have an performance framework, is you will also learn through the implementation of performance framework what are the additional things that you need to push a little bit harder on in your approval process, because you're noticing, oh, you know what? This keeps being a thing. Like we're noticing our schools are not necessarily getting this. This is where they struggle. So how do we make sure that they're set up for that? Okay, let's make sure we add a little bit more or some additional questions or push here in our approval process so that we can make sure that they're successful. So it's a cyclical process that does inform each component of the charter cycle. And so that's the benefit of it because you will learn from implementation where you need to push throughout the charter term. So again, it's not just about creating more bureaucracy. It protects the school by making those expectations transparent. It protects you by making decisions defensible, and ultimately protects students by ensuring the decisions are based on evidence rather than opinion. If you look at the news, there's lots of conversations about different decisions that boards have to make related to school closures or non-renewals. And so you want to make sure also that you have a performance framework that is very clear about how you make decisions and the expectations that you set forth. So there are three core domains of a charter school performance framework. So we know it clearly outlines the expectations. When we think about the expectations, they fall in three large domains. You've also probably heard them: the academic performance, organizational effectiveness, and financial health. So around, is the school actually delivering strong academic outcomes and fulfilling its educational mission? When we think about organizational effectiveness, is the school well governed and operationally signed and also compliant with all the applicable laws? And then financial health, is it fiscally viable and positioned for long-term sustainability? Those are kind of the guiding questions when we think about the domains. Any authorizer is going to look at, for the most part across the country, these are the three big areas that we're always looking at. The one we think about, again, the compliance, that is that organizational. Sometimes you might hear operational, but nonetheless, it's those three large domains. Within those domains, there are other components of the charter performance framework. These are just to associate you with some of the language. This will mean a little bit more when you have that conversation in August and begin to weigh those components. When we think about indicators, indicators are just the categories within the domain. The measures, this is the way in which you're going to evaluate each of those indicators. So think around proficiency rate or ratio, or even general compliance. For metrics, this is the evaluation of the measure. Your target, this is a goal that indicates whether the measure has been met. And rating is the label to categorize the rating, or the target rather, in terms of meets standard, does not meet, so on and so forth. There is a handout that you were provided that gives you just a quick overview from NACSA's work on performance frameworks. I wanted to provide you just a quick sample so you can see each component, the definition, but also see how it looks in each of those domains, whether it be it academic, financial, and organizational. Be about 2 minutes to just take a moment to look over that now that you have a little bit of context of what that is. And so when the conversation comes back in August, we'll go more in depth around like some of the proposed indicators, measures, and metrics that we begin to talk about, like what are those value adds? How do we want to actually measure it? What's the metric we'll use, and so on and so forth. But wanted to at least give you a little bit of an overview to see what that actually began to look like. When we think about those here's some sample indicators from each of those domains. And we think about the academic domain overall, this is really evaluating how students are doing, right? The academic performance. Of course, we have their student growth. There might be proficiency rates. There's the college and career readiness. This is, again, where you all can have some conversation and value proposition around, like, how do we actually define student success there? When we look at the organizational piece, these are focused on the presence and quality of school processes that are both legally and ethically required. It's also aligned to ensure that there are components related to the state and federal law requirements. finance, we need to make sure, an authorizer specifically, to make sure that your schools can pay their bills, right? And people can get paid, and there continues to be financially viable. Also, that if there is any risk of vulnerability, you have the oversight and the ability to see that proactively, not before, to make sure that there's a plan in place from that school to ensure no financial shortcomings. Does anyone know the most frequent reason, just overall, that charter schools close?
I would say finance.
Okay, finances? Ma'am? So poor academic performance, financial, financial issues, and then the other being low enrollment, which also leads into that finance, right? And so when we think about that ongoing oversight and the things in which we monitor, remember, we don't want to look at everything. It's about what matters. And so also being able to understand what are some of the trends that we know nationally that become what we call indicators of distress, something that we should keep our eye on. So we know, hey, if we're looking at enrollment, if we start seeing enrollment drop below this threshold, because we know enrollment equates to per pupil and you got a budget here, all right, something has to happen, right? And so it's around really being able to utilize some of that, what's happened, not only in this landscape, but also nationally, to make sure that we are monitoring the right things ongoingly. As well as taking a look at, even in your landscape, what are some of those conversations, what's happening, and making sure that we're thinking proactively about how do we make sure we keep our eyes on those things for our schools. So when we look at, this is just an intersection around charter law and performance frameworks. So as I mentioned in that Act 123, there is the section that I showed you all that was specifically related to what charter school authorizers must do. That's on the right where it says charter school authorizer requirements. Then in the red, these are just pulled from some of the charter school requirements, right? And so when you think about the three domains, we have academic, financial, and organizational. I want you to take a moment and look at these that are pulled out so we can figure out, where do you think that that monitoring of those would go? Would it go in academic? Would it go in organizational effectiveness or financial? Yes, sorry. Yep. So number 10 for the charter school requirement, this is a requirement outlined in statute that a charter school must do. As an authorizer, in terms of monitoring that, you have the academic domain, organizational domain, or financial domain. Where would you put number 10? I got this side of the table, making sure that this other side of the table. Are y'all in agreement with 10? Dr. Hill? Do you think so? One. Just number 10. Just number 10. Yeah, just number 10. Yep. Where would you put that? Okay. We all go with organization? Okay, agreed. Okay, agreed. Yeah, agreed. That's right. That's right. Y'all were looking at me. All right. What about number 3? Number 3. Where'd you put number 3? Financial. Absolutely. And this is really important because making sure that they have that financial audit is huge. And that can also be, when we see delay there, that can be an indicator of something else, right? When we, mostly when you all just named that one of the reasons that schools close, right, is around that financial. So it's beyond just the check mark they submitted it, but to that point, are they truly sustainable and viable, right? And is this going to continue to work, or are there findings, right? And what are they? And so there is a level of like not only just that compliance piece, but truly understanding and ensuring that as the authorizer, we also agree with this audit, right? And then we'll look at, as it relates to just for 11, this is in this part where charter school requirement for an authorizer. And this is that high bar of accountability that Dr. Stevenson was talking about within Acts 123. What domain does this fit in?
That's academic.
Academic. Academic, right? Because it is very clear, remember, because we're looking at the outcomes annually. This is very clear in law around if there are 3 consecutive years of low performance, there's a decision that has to be made, right? And so not only is that outlined in law, but you will also then have that in your framework decision.
I'm happy to see that they have the statement about the first year being excluded. It makes me feel like someone reasonable was writing this and they recognize some of the challenges when schools are first starting. So I'm happy to see that.
Any questions there? I just wanted to get you associated with understanding like how what is written in statute begins to show up, and we get to think about how that goes into those 3 domains and what our work actually is as an authorizer.
They also did that because they startup. So big, so they don't hold it in so high. It's still expecting, but not like you'll see that about the.
And you'll see it not only in the academic, but also in the financial as they're building up their reserve or their long-term, whether that's their fund balance, is also that piece. Understanding that, hey, first year is going to be a little bit different because I'm still potentially adding on. So you also see kind of a rev up in the financial compliance too. Based on your law related to the academic performance specifically, and it's the 3rd consecutive year. So it depends on where they are in their contract, but it's the 3rd consecutive year based on the statute is around where a decision has to be made around a low performance if it's 3 consecutive years.
Gotcha. Okay. Okay. 3, okay.
Yep.
And again, that's the state, right? You could have a higher bar,
Right.
you can have a lower bar in the state. You can have a higher bar, right? Like, so can do one of the things that, with our school that we just approved, we approved them with school-specific issues. And part of those that we put in front of you was looking at them at their 3-year mark to see where they are. And that's because of what we knew about their prior performance, right? We said, hey, we want to actually have a little bit of a higher bar where might not necessarily go through a large review regularly, but for this school, we're going to take you through a more rigorous review period because we have concerns. So you can also, as a board, make your bar higher. You don't have to say, in this case, the state is saying, regardless of what your performance framework is, if this happens in our state, 3 years below, you're gone. You could say, for your performance framework, it's 2 years. Like, you can do that if that's what that contract between your school would be. Now, again, you got to think about the balance between being a high quality authorizer and also being a realistic authorizer, right? And what's happening, because there is competition. It's not like they can't, you're not the sole authorizer in the state. So you go too hard, if you're going to come here, right? Like, this is unsustainable in terms of performance. I'd rather go to, our main competitor framework. Yeah.
I have a question. We were talking about the 3 consecutive years. Is it looking at all 3 of them, the academic and the financial? Or what if my academic might be here and my financial here? So are you looking at, what are you looking at for the all 3 consecutive years?
Yep. So this is specifically in your state law and it's related to your academic performance. Yeah, this is, but to that point though, right? This is where we go back to when we think about how you all create yours, you may have different triggers related to measures where it could be across, depending on the ratings on multiple ratings. But this is specifically around what the law says is the floor related to academic outcomes.
Unpack the scenario of we have a school, it is year 2. They are struggling. I think the line of demarcation between how we support them or spur them on to address this and us overstepping. I would love for us to kind of tease that out some. So it's obvious that there's something going on. They've not performed well for their performance is going low for the last 2 years. So when we are trying to support them and address this, like where is that line?
Yeah, can I ask for clarity when you say they are not performing? Is there a specific domain you want to talk
So
about?
I want to deal with this particular law and this academic component. The scores are tanking. We've seen it 2 years now. So we've got 1 more year based on what the state is saying. We need to intervene. And so what is an acceptable intervention? And what's the difference between supporting them and pushing them and overstepping?
For one, we're taking notes because these are good conversations for us to have about, in terms of what you're really talking about, like collective action. When do we know and what are we that tier of escalation? So I think that's a larger conversation for us to have. So if it's okay, we would like to table that, but bring that back as a scenario to talk about some different ways that that can be solved to figure out where we want to come from. Because you could definitely have that right next to you. You could also have where I think what's going on here, they are failing academically but doing well financially, or vice versa, which is what you also have a lot of times. Schools are academically well, but financially they're just in the toilet, right? Because of enrollment, mismanagement, whatever it is. So we can bring back some scenarios to talk about how we want to fall on that and what it looks like and how different outcomes.
Yeah. I love discussion. I thank you. Any other?
It's really good for
Yeah.
us to think about how we go to training with you all and bring that back so we'll bring back
Yeah.
scenarios because there really is no right or wrong answer. It's really who we want to be, right? The state is going to create a floor for us if we think about that. But then where do we want to be on it? And what do we balance between like holding a really high bar, being competitive, our value proposition, and all of that? But that's a great question, right? And you should be saying, I love that the board is asking that. That's exactly what you should say. It's half of the very 3 years. We got this two. What are we doing? What is our monitoring look like? What is our oversight looking like in between those times?
And it also begins to inform the type of information your staff will present to you, right? Around like whether it's corrective actions or the notices, and this is how they're remitting it. So now you're beginning to see like how your board meetings will develop about the information that you receive and want to know for your schools to make sure that there is, hey, we're looking at this and we're communicating it.
We can already tell you don't want to be a spot. I want to surprise. You
Yeah.
don't like this, don't for nobody. Don't
Yeah. At all.
No.
Yeah. Yeah.
I said, give a lot of discretion. State would be. But for the difference, we need to monitor, like, notice that. You're not gonna find those. You are gonna focus. I can see. This school that
performance framework is also more than just that compliance tool. It truly creates value for everyone. For schools, it provides clarity and transparency in the expectations and predictable accountability, right? The idea of like, if this happens, then I know what's coming. For your authorizer, as an authorizer, it's consistent oversight. It provides you the cover and defensible decisions that you're going to have to make around those high stake decisions. And then for our students, at the end of the day, they get better outcomes, they get quality schools, and a stronger public trust when it is clear what your expectations are and how you are holding schools accountable. So as we end today, there's some discussion questions that I want us to have, and this gets us at kind of some of the value and who we are as an authorizer. And so this is some of the setting for the conversation that you'll have in August. And so as we mentioned, when we think about just an authorizer's framework, more often than not across the country, they're all going to have academic domain, an organizational operational domain, and a financial, right? You all have an opportunity as the first HBCU authorizer to really begin to say, what do we value? And so when we think about if someone was to pick up a framework, how would they know it was yours? What truly distinguishes you as an authorizer? And so I want to just throw out a couple of questions, and we'll start with this first one. What should distinguish a school authorized by HBCU from one another, anyone that's authorized from anyone else? And so specifically with Voorhees, like if they were to pick up your framework, how would they know that it was the Voorhees authorizer performance framework? What are the things that you want to be true? And you don't have to get into indicators, but more around like the values.
Understanding, a clear understanding of the history of the plight of underserved communities, students, families, and certainly with some level of justice on lots of levels, not just social justice, environmental justice, across the board. That ought to be glaring in our identity.
What was that?
Has a genuine concern for the constituents that we serve. In that we understand what each school plans to offer for the students and what we expect to be a good, clear outcome for our students. And we're clear and concise about that.
Equity.
Particularly as you're giving them what they really need, right? As opposed to the equality, right? The equity, right? What do they need to be achieving as opposed to that bigger formula of giving I think equity gives everyone what they need as opposed to trying to equalize it.
So I want to add to equity where schools would demonstrate how they have plans for building or bringing students to higher levels of performance or whatever the case may be. That's a way of building equity.
Born out of an HBCU, those partnerships with local or cross states, higher education institutions should be embedded somewhere, in that. The partnerships, of course, with families, with communities, with churches, but of course, institutions of higher education. Maybe in the summer, summer bridge programs for graduating seniors or rising seniors at the institution, the university. Maybe professors or instructors from the university participating in research with a science lab at a middle school. Just partnerships throughout or embedded in the curricula.
So I have two things, and one would be a very obvious commitment to social mobility. Social mobility, that we see education as an opportunity to help people create the lives they desire and deserve. And the other is demonstrating, and I'm glad I don't have to come up with metrics or a way to measure this, but demonstrating an understanding and appreciation for how academic standards, sometimes standardized assessments, don't always account for the growth that's demonstrated, that there's an understanding that sometimes you have to look at where students are beginning to determine whether or not strong instruction and academic rigor is in place.
So looking forward 10 years from now, when you renew a charter, what would make you proud to say that this school reflects who we are as an authorizer?
I would say one thing would be just a demonstrated pipeline of students graduating and attending HBCUs. Starting with Voorhees University, founded in
There you go. There you go.
1897.
So there you go.
What what happened to them after they graduated from a charter school that we were the authorizer of?
Mhm.
What have they done? And it ties back into what Dr. Hopkins is saying. Did they go to an HBCU and were they successful? What did we pour into them that they are now able to pour out even to other people? What are our outputs? What does it look like?
And I'm just curious, would this board within a framework that compare the outcome of Voorhees to other non-Voorhees charters? Or do you want to see that type of?
Very much so. Yes. Yes.
That was, we literally were having a conversation about that, saying that that would be a very unique value proposition to be able to say, look at what happened with schools authorized by us.
Right. Yes.
Because of our.
And we would want ours to speak to the fact that they got exceptional training after having participated in this particular schools or in those schools that we authorized.
Related to that, I would be proud if we can say that our schools can grow students, as in where students start, when you can tell when a student has gone through that particular experience because they're able to move learning.
To add on to that, to retain high quality teachers and school leaders is very important, especially because of the teacher shortage we have around the world today.
And
As you look at
somehow I would like it to demonstrate how effectively the community can add to the school and its school input, with its school operation. So we're focused on the student, but also I think we have to ensure that it can show how to effectively utilize input from the community, or it may not necessarily, yeah, be input, whether their engagement, within the school. Because I know that I'm thinking about when we were deciding, we asked about the community, and I don't think we have said a lot today about that. So somewhere it must be how the community was actively engaged in some way, or could be, or effectively, without overreach even there. Sure, because there are ways that that can be done. Sure.
I'm sure you're familiar with the Call Me Mr. program, right?
Mhm.
I had the opportunity to hire several young men that wanted to, young men that were participants of Call Me Mr. And I declare unto you, you could tell the difference from a young man who was a part of the Call Me Mr. program and his performance in a classroom as compared to an, another young man. And that's not a put down to the teachers and their performance, but there was a marked difference in the way those young men carried the program, carried on their classroom, and the activities they performed in that classroom, and the way their students turned out. So we would like to see something like that, that somebody can say, well, those students must have attended, they must have been under the authorization of Voorhees University, because they had these things in place, and they're visible. You can see it. That's what I would like to see. Somebody, it's a marked difference.
I'd love to co-narrate. I'd love to see what they look like, the soft skill too, just the way they carry themselves, the way, and there's a development. And for the record, Dr. Hill is a former director of Call Me Mister.
Oh, okay. Well, their students turn out well. They turn out really well.
The championships, right? How do you, like, their Hall of Fame? Like, what is it? Like, how many, you know, Fulbright students come out of that? Like, what are the
Yes.
championship moments of each of the schools that then become, again, from the state? Are they blue ribbon? Whatever that is, how do we then celebrate the championships? That has to be a part of the reflection and the brag.
Yes.
And would it be appropriate for us to set up our own system of acknowledgement of excellence, do our own blue ribbon type acknowledgement of our schools? That would be interesting. If even within our own portfolio, we have a standard and identified that standard and recognize schools based on that standard.
What should schools know that they can expect from you that they may not experience with another authorizer?
They're going to know that we're no nonsense. We, the directions are clear. We do expect you to follow them. We're going to be here to help you. If you get in the ditch, we're going to be here to help get you out. But that there are just certain expectations, and you're to meet those. And that we're appreciative of all your efforts and what you're doing. But you must meet the standard.
Unwavering support on all levels, but and effective communication, not being surprised by, oh, we're not doing something right, but because we have such a solid and such a tight framework that there will be monitoring that we're communicating and nothing is a surprise to them. Um, any type of corrective action, they would have seen that coming down the line far before it actually happens. But but knowing that we're going to support them from beginning to end is critical.
I would say a dedication to developing leaders that are in the schools, um, to advance education to excellence. That's what Voorhees is built on, excellence, as well as having a social impact. So the dedication of developing and enhancing and polishing leaders within the schools.
I think it's been said, but concisely, we are about high accountability as well as high support. We expect them to do well, but we're going to support them and be cheering them along the way.
Thank you for engaging in this discussion with these questions because I think it does begin to frame. You all don't know this, but you've called out some things that I've heard them over here. I'm like, yeah, that's this type of measure and metric because it does help to really begin to make sure that the heart and essence of who you all as authorizers also shows up in the framework. Because not only is it about clear expectations for the schools you authorize, but it also sends a message for those that are interested, right? You already have people that are reaching out and knocking on your door, and that's just based off of who you are thus far. But when you have these clear expectations of performance framework and see how you hold schools accountable or what your measure of success is, you're going to drive other people to you to say, I want to be there, right? Because they care about making sure that students not only graduate, but then they're also going to HBCU. So if I'm a founding school leader and that's my vision for my school, well, guess who I'm going to go to be authorized, right? And so you're creating that pipeline through also articulating your expectations in that way. And so as I leave you all today, appreciate this conversation and, there's still a lot of work to continue to do, but hopefully this provides clarity for you all, at least just in terms of the foundational understanding of a performance framework, making sure that you understand there's also the ongoing activities, there's high stake decisions that you have to make. We're grounded in the statute to say what our role and responsibilities are, but that's our floor. We can begin to continue to build upon that and making sure that you have an accountability tool that is providing clear expectations, not only for you as an authorizer, but the school. And at the end of the day, we do this all in service of kids and ensures that our students are in quality schools. And so one thing that I want you all to think through before we get ready to leave is finishing this sentence. VUSO authorizes schools that. And so would love to hear from each of you as we close out to finish that. Yep, VUSO authorizes schools that.
Are anchored in excellence. And that could mean a lot of stuff.
I would say that will always follow the standards that are set before them.
We promote excellence.
That transform lives.
Is that everybody?
That ensures opportunities, fairness, and accountability.
Thank you so much. Thank you all for your time and hope this was helpful.
Thank you, Dr. Peterson. Goodness, Chantel, thank you so much. Can you imagine the work they put in to make this presentation for us today? We are absolutely appreciative, and I'm excited because we should have done a pre and post assessment because I feel like I've learned so much from this session, and I know my colleagues have. But certainly, we thank you, and we do know that this is just the tip of the iceberg. But you have illuminated much thought. You've illuminated many questions that we have to contemplate and make certain that we certainly come together and develop, and we will be prepared to contribute to the framework. So we're very happy that we have the foundation to even understand and now to be able to know what our expectation is for contributing to the framework. So thank you, thank you, thank you. This has been absolutely wonderful. I'll say that on behalf of my colleagues. Continuing with our agenda, is there any other business, colleagues? So hearing none, I will note for the record, our next meeting is scheduled for August 20th, 2026, and will be held virtually, August 20, 2026. I want to thank everyone again, our board members, our staff, and everyone who participated in today's meetings. Certainly thank you to those who have participated or viewed our meeting remotely. I will say again, Dr. Peterson, thank you so very much. This was absolutely wonderful. Thank you, Chantel Wright. Thank you, Mr. Smalley. Thank you, Dr. Stevenson. Thank you, board, for your commitment. So let's continue to build a legacy of excellence and integrity in public education. At this time, colleagues, I will entertain a motion to adjourn. Moved by Dr. Sojourner, seconded by Dr. Hightower Mitchell. Dr. Hill, what say you? Vice President O'Berry, Dr. Green, Dr. Hightower Mitchell, Dr. Sojourner. The motion to adjourn passes. This concludes our meeting today. Thank you all. Have a wonderful, blessed day. Thank you so much.